3 spine-chilling true horror stories uncovered on the terrifying first day of work. Megan stood at the entrance of the old diner, the neon sign buzzing like a hive of angry bees. Tonight was her first night shift, and she was buzzing with anticipation, but a lingering chill prickled her skin. Everybody in town knew the place, but the whispers were darker than the coffee brewed inside. It was the kind of spot where the comfort of greasy fries and diner chatter felt shackled to ghost stories. Employees vanished without a trace. Customers lingered too long, their faces pale and vacant. And yet, she clung to the hope of building a better life for her daughter, the weight of her dreams as heavy as the diner's aging floor. As plates clattered and fryers hissed, the warm atmosphere began to sink into the shadows. Regulars congregated at the counter, their eyes darting like trapped animals, murmuring cryptic warnings under polite smiles that never quite reached their eyes. The clock's hands crept toward midnight, and the diner dimmed like a stage curtain falling. Then, he arrived. The man at the counter, polished and confident, held her gaze with an unsettling intensity, like a predator sizing up its prey. His voice dripped with charm, but his questions cut deep about her life, her daughter, her dreams. Megan forced a smile, but her insides churned. Something was off. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Megan shrank under the weight of the flickering lights overhead, attributing it to the diner's antiquated electrical system. But as she gripped her order pad, dread seeped into her bones. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch and coil, constricting with each passing moment, pulling at her sanity. When the last of the patrons dribbled out, the palpable chill warped around her, curling fingers of ice down her spine. The rhythmic hum of the neurotic open sign felt like her only lifeline to reality. As she scrubbed the counter, a dark thought crept in: what if her coworkers were part of this twisted legacy? Panic roared in her chest. She was desperate for a paycheck, but this diner felt like a trap. Each clatter of her cleaning supplies echoed loudly in the silence, blending with ghost stories of unmarked graves and restless souls crying out from below. Suddenly, the oppressive atmosphere crushed against her like a thick blanket, stifling her breath, and just as she surprised herself with a moment of resolve, a shadow flickered in the window, a figure lurking just beyond her vision, watching her, waiting with sinister patience. As the door swung open, her heart raced. The polished man strode in, that same smirk plastered across his face. "Thought you could close up without saying goodbye," he said, a hint of mockery curling his lips. Megan's mind reeled with fear, the blood rushing from her head, leaving only one chilling thought: this nightmare was only just beginning, and somehow, the key to her escape might be tied to the very person she feared the most. Megan's pulse quickened as the man leaned closer, the smell of his cologne sharp and cloying amidst the greasy air. His eyes glittered with a hungry curiosity, as if he were savoring her fear. The silence in the diner thickened, wrapping around them like a noose. She could almost hear her heartbeat echoing off the walls. "What do you want?" she stammered, gripping the edge of the counter to steady herself. It felt more like a cling to sanity, as if the smooth surface could anchor her to reality. "Oh, just your company," he replied, his smile widening, revealing too many teeth. "You're new here, and I thought I might share some stories of your lovely workplace." The tightness in her throat tightened even further. She could already guess where his stories were heading. The dread that had clouded her mind all night resurfaced, tinged with the sickly sweetness of 1,000 townsfolk's whispered horrors. But she held her ground, steeling herself against the tide of instinct urging her to flee. "I'm not interested," she snapped, an edge of defiance sharpening her voice. "But you should be," he cooed, with a glint of amusement in his eyes. "Everyone who works here deserves to know what they've walked into." He paused, letting the silence stretch. "A place like this, it has a history." The words hung ominously in the air. She needed to push back, to demand clarity despite the terror creeping in. What kind of history? His gaze turned darker, the room colder. You're not the first to serve these tables. Many have come and gone. Some never left. A chill raced down her back. Ghosts, she thought. It wasn't just a tale. It was living, breathing horror. Megan forced herself to swallow, choking down fear, her mind imagining faces she would never see but could sense those who might have lingered in this very spot, forever entwined in the diner's chilling legacy. What happened to them? She asked, her voice cracking. Was she truly ready to hear what he had to say? A chilling grin spread across his face, the kind that made every hair on her body stand on end. That depends on your actions. Some simply vanish, as if the diner swallowed them whole. Others become a part of the story, trapped in a cycle of service they can't escape. Megan took a step back, her thoughts racing. She could hear herself tremble in the stillness. That's insane. Is it? He countered, unfazed. You'll fit in just fine if you're willing to play your part. Besides, the night is still young. Megan felt the walls closing in, the familiar warmth of the diner literally turning frigid. She glanced around, the other employees who had left, would they come back? What if they were part of this darkness? Stay a little longer, he urged softly. I promise to make it worth your while. The story has just begun, Megan. The clock struck midnight, its sound echoing like a death knell. Megan could no longer ignore the weight of the air, thick and suffocating. There were deeper shadows lining the walls than just the absence of light. She felt a rush of desperation. No. I'm done with stories. You can't escape the tale, he said, and there was something new in his voice, a sharp edge laced with menace. Not while you stand in this diner. Panic rose in her throat as she turned to flee. But the door slid shut, an invisible force holding it fast. The flickering lights dimmed again, casting long shadows that danced along the floor. The smirk on his face widened, and something ominous settled in her gut. This was only the tip of the nightmare iceberg. What was it she had unwittingly joined? The figure loomed behind her, a dark silhouette against the weak light. You might want to think twice before you leave. There's more at stake than you know, and just like that, she caught a glimpse of those who had come before her, their cold, haunting eyes staring back from the mirror of the diner wall, caught between worlds, while she realized, she was just beginning to enter the horror that lay in wait. Megan's heart pounded in her chest, each thud a frantic plea for escape. The man's dark presence loomed behind her, an unyielding shadow that threatened to swallow her whole. She turned, breath coming in ragged gasps, scanning the diner for anything that might offer hope. But all she found were the empty booths, their upholstery frayed, whispering long-forgotten secrets. Don't look so frightened, he murmured, his voice silky smooth, like butter on a hot skillet. You can't escape what you are. You're already part of the ghost stories. Let me out. She begged, her voice small against the kitchen clatter that had just registered in her mind. The clanking pots, the sizzling on the grill, a sound that should have felt comforting now twisted into a sinister symphony orchestrating her panic. That he chuckled softly, bending closer. You think you can just walk away? This diner's grip is stronger than you can imagine. You'll find that stories don't just vanish, they bleed into reality. As he spoke, the lights flickered violently, plunging her into darkness for a split second, long enough for her imagination to ignite. The faces in the mirror, the employees turned specters, began to seem more real, their eyes wide and mournful, seeing her but not able to reach out. Were they trying to warn her? Why don't you ask them what happened? He taunted, gesturing toward the glass. Megan swallowed hard, feeling every fiber of her being urged to run, but dread rooted her feet in place, her body unwilling to abandon reality, no matter how horrifying. What are they? She whispered, pain clawing at her throat. Lost souls in a never-ending shift. Like you could be if you're not careful. His grin widened, revealing a cruel twist. Suddenly, the diner's buzzing fluorescent lights settled into an eerie stillness. Time felt suspended, as if the walls themselves held their breath. The patrons, despite being lifeless figures now, drew her attention. There was something tragic yet captivating about their expressions, an unspoken warning urging her forward or perhaps pulling her backward toward some dreadful fate. "What do you mean if I'm not careful?" she finally demanded, edge of desperation lacing her words. A hand shot out, gripping her arm with surprising strength. "You must learn the rules of this place, Megan. If you're not quick-witted, you might find yourself caught in an endless loop, trapped serving the same meals, day in and day out, while your memories fade like the shadows on these walls." The threat hung heavy in the air. Her stomach dropped at the thought of becoming one of those empty-eyed figures, forever lost, just another cautionary tale murmured among new hires. "I won't let that happen," she snapped, forcing defiance into her tone. But inside, fear twisted fiercely. "You've already let it happen." His voice lowered, almost soothing. "Your arrival only feeds the cycle. Every new employee is a fresh chapter, a new story to weave into the fabric of the diner's history." Just then, a loud bang resounded from the kitchen, startling both of them. The clatter echoed like a gunshot, and Megan instinctively jerked away. The figure dissipated for a moment, obscured by the panic surging through her. She looked back at the swinging kitchen door, breath caught in her throat. A shadow slipped through, and Megan's world tilted. The figure wasn't alone. More of them spilled out, wispy apparitions wearing faded uniforms, faces like distorted reflections of her own. They moved closer, their expressions shifting from mournful to eerily cheerful, as if they were warning her about something or inviting her into the fold. The man's voice, now distant, carried back to her, "You'll see, Megan. They'll welcome you eventually." The walls felt like they were closing in as her vision blurred in terror. She was losing track of time, losing track of reality. Megan felt her grip slip, both on the counter and on her sanity. The diner was a trap, and she was its next prey. But breaking free would demand a choice, a reckoning with what lay just beyond the door. Suddenly, the diner plunged into utter silence. Would she step forward into the dark destiny others had faced or fight this fate? The door rattled inexplicably as if teasing her, whispering to the desperation that enveloped her. "Choose wisely," echoed in her mind as she moved toward it, unsure what awaited. What if stepping through meant becoming part of the same horror she feared? But as the shadow figures began to close in, licking at her sanity, another thought pierced through the fog. What if staying meant losing all sense of self? And just like that, the floor shifted beneath her, the air thickening, and the stories waiting to unfold were trembling at her very fingertips, urging her deeper into the mystery she dared not comprehend. Megan's hand hovered over the doorknob, cold sweat trickling down her spine. She could feel the weight of the stares from the shadow figures, their faces a grotesque parody of welcoming smiles. Each blink echoed the haunting memories of those who had come before her, lost souls, like beads on a string, fading one by one. "Choose wisely," the whisper wrapped around her, tightening like a vice. The door trembled, begging to be opened, but fear tied her feet to the floor. With every heartbeat, the air thickened. The kitchen sounds had faded into a muted hum, replaced by an oppressive silence that pressed against her eardrums. She squeezed her eyes shut, willing the figures to disappear, but when she opened them again, they were closer. "Join us," one of them murmured, a hollow smile stretching across its lips. "You'll never be alone." "No," Megan breathed, her voice barely a whisper. Her heart thundered against her ribcage, as if it would burst free. The light flickered again, and the diner transformed. The walls warped and shifted. The linoleum tiles began to pulse, as if alive. She stumbled back, nauseated by the sight. Chairs scraped against the floor, the air heavy with a mix of grease and despair. "You can't hide from the truth," the man's voice, no longer distant, slithered back into her mind. "Once you're here, you're part of the story whether you like it or not." In a split second, the nostalgic smells of burgers and fries twisted into a foul stench, something rotten and decaying. She turned, looking for an exit. The door seemed to warp, stretching and pulling away from her grasp. "Help!" she screamed, the word a desperate plea. No response. Only the shadow figures continued to wade toward her, their movements fluid and synchronized, each one echoing her own sense of dread. She glanced around the diner, every face she passed dimmed with a muted glow, their eyes pleading silently for her to understand. A shrill laughter erupted from the depths of the kitchen, slicing through the heavy silence like a knife. It was a sound so jarring that it sent chills racing down her spine. As if on cue, the apparitions froze. Their mouths stopped moving, but their eyes remained fixated on her, filled with an unsettling mix of glee and hunger. "What are you?" she gasped, backing up against the counter, its edge biting into her back. "Not yet," one whispered, its lips barely moving but the words cutting deep. "Not until you make your choice, stay or go." The noise from the kitchen swelled, collapsing like waves against the shore. A figure emerged, shrouded in shadow, hunched over something she couldn't quite see. Clattering utensils and a sickening squelch echoed in the background. Whatever was happening in there felt raw and visceral, pulling at the edges of her sanity. "You must decide." The man's voice grew urgent. "Before the shift changes again and you become just like them." Megan's breath quickened as she surveyed the diner one last time, wishing for a reprieve but finding none. Behind her, the door still quivered, a siren song luring her in. Was outside the answer, or was it merely another trap? Just then, the lights flickered once more, plunging her into darkness for a heartbeat longer than before. And when they returned, she found herself standing in a different part of the diner, tables rearranged, faces now lacking even the shadow of recognition. Panic flared inside her, blinding her reason. Every exit seemed unreachable, and the figure's laughter mingled with her racing heart. Suddenly, a memory surged up. An old woman with a vacant expression had warned her just hours before, "Don't ever take the job." Was it too late to heed the advice? Megan's instincts screamed for her to flee, but with every desperate thought, the walls of the diner seemed to close in tighter. The more she hesitated, the more the shadows crept closer, urging her toward oblivion. "Choose," the voices hummed, deep and resonant that as she grasped the door handle, a riveting truth sliced through her fear. What if the real horror was not just the loss of herself, but the loss of hope entirely? With a final, heart-stopping breath, she pressed the door open a crack. The air rushing in was sweet but mixed with a heavy scent of despair. "What's waiting for you out there?" the echoes taunted softly. Would freedom be a cruel deception or the chance to unravel the nightmare? Megan hesitated, her heart dangling on the precipice of fate, ready to jump into the unknown. But just as she steeled herself to step through, the door began to forcefully pull back, almost like it had its own will. "Welcome home," it whispered as darkness encroached around her. What awaited beyond? Would she ever truly escape? Would what lay beyond shatter her more than the diner ever could? The door slammed shut with a thunderous crash, sending a shockwave through Megan's body. She stumbled backward as the oppressive darkness swallowed her whole. With her heart racing, she felt every shadow pulling at her limbs, drawing her deeper into the restaurant's malevolence. Panic seized her mind like a vice, ramming thoughts of escape against countless warnings echoing through her head. She turned, desperate to find another way out, but the diner had transformed into a labyrinth of swirling shadows. Each figure now flickered in and out of focus, their grotesque forms shifting and melding into one another. The hushed whispers grew louder, swirling around her, echoing her fears. "Stay with us," a chorus chanted, their voices thick with a sickly sweet drawl. "You belong here forever." Megan pressed her palms against her ears, but the voices seeped through, wrapping around her thoughts. She had to think. She had to fight against whatever this was. How this place had ensnared so many souls before her was no longer shrouded in mystery. The diner wasn't just a diner, it was a trap, and she was its prey. Amidst the shadows, the figure from the kitchen re-emerged. This time, it held a cleaver stained with dark, congealed remnants. A chilling smile stretched across its face, a face unrecognizable, yet somehow familiar. She felt bile rise in her throat as it stepped closer, revealing its grotesque form, a mockery of humanity. "Join us or be the next to serve," it hissed. The cleaver glinted ominously in the dim light, slicing through the stillness. "No!" she screamed, adrenaline surging through her limbs. She charged toward the edge of the counter, searching for anything and object to defend herself, a tool that could sever her ties with this nightmare, but just as hope flared, the lights dimmed to a ghostly glow. The shadows thickened, looming over her like black clouds determined to gather and destroy. With raw panic fueling her, she darted towards a flickering neon sign marked "Exit" in clashing, peeling colors. She lunged forward, her breath ragged and hoarse, her fingers grasped the edge of the door, which felt shockingly warm. Just then, a surge of laughter echoed from behind her, wild, frenzied, mocking. She looked over her shoulder, and the figures danced in a grotesque circle, their faces twisted with insanity and malice. "Leave now." "But dear, don't you want to know the secret?" one figure whispered, stepping closer, its milky eyes glimmering with a sickening excitement. "We've all waited so long to meet you, to learn what darkness lurks within you." Megan recoiled, her instinct screaming for her to escape before they could unveil whatever horror they had in store. She shot back towards the door, wrenching it open with a desperation that could drown out their taunts. Her heart raced as she hesitated, just for an instant, the warm light washing over her skin like a beacon, but the voices clawed at the edges of her mind, threatening to pull her back. "You can't escape, you want to leave. There is something more waiting for you inside." She hesitated, glancing back once more as dread settled over her like a shroud. Would she find salvation in the light, or would the secrets of the diner force her back into the abyss? And then, from the shadows, a hand reached out, cold and skeletal, grasping for her ankle. Megan's breath hitched as darkness swirled around her. Everything shifted, and for an unsettling moment, the walls of the diner felt alive, pulsating like a beating heart. "Decide!" they wailed, confusion blending with manic laughter. In that instant, Megan knew one truth: her fate was entangled with theirs. She had to choose, and choose now. The door remained ajar, the temptation of the outside world beckoning her, while the pull of the shadows promised knowledge and power wrapped in horror. Could she bear to learn the awful truth, or would ignorance be a blessing? As she prepared to leap through the door, the shadows surged wildly, a final, chilling warning echoing in her ears: "Your choice will change you forever." With her heart pounding like a war drum, Megan took a deep breath and prepared to leap into the unknown. Would the light hold her salvation, or would it be merely a prelude to her doom? Megan jolted forward, thrusting herself into the warm light just as a cacophony of wails erupted behind her. The pressure of the darkness clawed at her back, resentful of her escape. She stumbled out into the night and fell to the pavement. A hard breath escaped her lips. She was free. But the air tasted different, tainted and cruel, like ash settling in her throat. She scrambled up, her legs trembling beneath her, and looked back at the diner. The neon lights flickered ominously, casting jagged shadows that danced against the cracked windows. For a brief moment, it seemed to breathe, the door shifting slightly as though inviting her to return. But the laughter that overlaid the cold air sent shivers down her spine. It was a siren song of despair. Megan took off down the street, pulse racing, but the echoes of the diner haunted her steps. Each footfall was a reminder that something unnatural had reached out to her. Had she truly escaped? Or was this just the beginning? Her mind raced with questions. What would have awaited her inside if she had stayed? The idea clawed at her, asking if she was truly free or just lingering at the edge of a trap. The words of those shadowed figures looped in her thoughts, taunting her. Was it the truth they offered, or just another form of deception? The cool night air felt sharp against her skin, grounding her, but the darkness loomed heavy, an omnipresent weight. She stumbled down the abandoned street, eyes scanning for any signs of life. The moon hung in the sky like a watchful eye, illuminating the cracked pavement. Every rustle, every whisper of the wind felt like it was alive, vibrating with the lingering energy of that forsaken diner. She finally found solace when she turned a corner and saw a flickering street lamp. A splash of color from a nearby diner, one that looked different, brighter, cut through the dread that cloaked her. Taking a deep breath, she approached it, desperate for warmth and comfort, but as she stepped inside, an unsettling chill washed over her. The familiar scent of grease and coffee hung in the air, yet it felt wrong, tainted. The patron sat silent, eyes hollow and fixed, as if they were all waiting for something she couldn't comprehend. Just a nightmare, she whispered to herself, though the words felt feeble against the dark reality encasing her. Megan slid into a booth, trying to catch her breath. The waitress appeared, her expression disturbingly vacant. "What'll it be?" she asked, her voice flat. "Coffee, a black coffee, please," Megan replied, her voice shaking slightly. As the waitress walked away, a figure caught Megan's eye from the corner of the diner. A man sat alone, his hands gripping a stained menu. She recognized the eyes, the same milky gaze she had seen in the diner. He met her stare, a ghostly smile spreading across his face, and her heart sank. He had escaped too, but the air around him felt heavy with secrets. "Join us," he mouthed silently, the words crashing against her like a wave. Panic surged anew. She tried to look away, but the pull of his gaze was magnetic. Her heart raced faster, and an unfamiliar dread pooled in her stomach. What does this mean? She thought. The waitress returned with the coffee, and before she realized what she was doing, Megan leaned in, desperate for answers. "What's wrong with everyone? Why does he look like he came from the diner?" The waitress's eyes flickered for just a moment, a flaring spark of understanding before the emptiness returned. "Some things never leave you once you've seen. It's all a matter of time." Her words ran through Megan like ice, chilling her bones. A cold hand gripped the back of her neck as she realized the truth. She had merely traded one shadow for another. The diner hadn't truly let her go. With her heart pounding, she shot up from the booth, the coffee cup clattering to the floor, shattering like her hopes. She needed to escape again, but now the shadows in her mind flickered ominously, whispering that her new location was far worse than the darkness she had just fled. Something was waiting for her at the end of this road, lurking just beyond the foul taint of her decisions. It wouldn't let her rest easily, and outside, that haunting laughter began to echo again, deeper and more chilling than she ever remembered. What would it demand from her this time? She stepped back toward the door, but she could feel the shadows closing in, tightening around her. Could there be another way out? Megan's breath came in ragged gasps as she bolted toward the entrance, the door seemingly warping in her sight. The laughter outside had formed into a symphony of torment, a fragile melody that twisted her insides. She didn't want to look back, but the weight of that gaze, the milky eyes boring into her, tugged at her, unwilling to let go. "Get back!" she cried at the empty, oppressive diner, the words slipping through her quivering lips. The waitress and the patrons remained frozen, not even flinching at her distress. It felt like they were all part of a macabre show, starring in a play where she was the only one who hadn't read the script. She darted for the door, feeling cold fingers brush her shoulder. Megan gasped and spun around, eyes wild. The waitress had snuck up behind her, the same vacant expression tightened into something twisted. "You can't leave," she whispered, her voice low and sibilant, like the hiss of a snake. "You're one of us now." A surge of adrenaline fueled her panic and she pushed past the waitress. Bursting through the door, she stumbled into the night. The air was suffocating, each breath felt like dragging in gravel. She staggered away from the diner, half blinded by the street lamp flickering above her. In the distance, shadows danced along the sides of the street, morphing and pulsating in ways that defied logic. Was this what she had traded for her safety? The familiar slice of dread, the razor-sharp realization that something was always lurking, waiting. Her mind raced back to the diner, to the man with the eerie grin. "Join us," those twisted words echoed, coiling around her thoughts. She was hunted, and she felt like prey with nowhere to hide. The streets were deserted, yet she could feel eyes on her. Not the distant stars, something darker. The graffiti lining the alley walls suddenly shifted, letters morphing into faces that scowled and leered. She glanced around, disoriented, her senses screaming at her to run. Rounding another corner, she stumbled into what looked like an old gas station, its lights flickering sporadically, offering just enough illumination to reveal its dilapidated state. She rushed inside, heart hammering against her ribs, only to find a flickering neon sign that read, "Open 24 hours." An illusion of safety surrounded her. "Hello," she called, her voice trembling as it bounced around the empty space. Silence swallowed her words, leaving behind an eerie echo. She stepped further in, each creak of the floorboards amplifying the tension. The counter stood barren, but a chill skittered down her spine when her eyes landed on the old payphone, its receiver hanging loosely, as though waiting for someone to pick it up. A loud bang from behind her made her whirl around, but nothing was there. The surge of adrenaline urged her to flee, yet something held her rooted in place. She approached the phone, at first hesitating, but then against her better judgment gripped the receiver. She raised it to her ear, the static buzzing inside echoing the chaos in her mind. "Help please," was all she managed to whisper, before the line crackled. "Megan," the voice was deep and grating, laced with malice. It wasn't an unfamiliar voice. She had heard it before, rippling through the laughter of the diner, through the restless spirits that had crowded her thoughts. "You cannot escape, only transform." Megan dropped the receiver, and the sound rang out like a gunshot. Panic twisted her stomach as she scanned the eerie station. Nothing felt real, yet everything felt too familiar. The shadows stretched forward, creeping like fingers, demanding her return, swallowing her in despair. Just then, the lights flickered out completely, plunging her into darkness. And in the suffocating silence, the laughter returned. This time, it was different. It wasn't a distant echo, it echoed from inside her. She gasped and turned, only to find she wasn't alone. Many figures shrouded in darkness stood behind her, their hollow eyes reflecting the light of the stars above. Megan's heart stopped. Could they hear her thoughts? Did they want her to join them in their torment as well? Suddenly, the silhouettes all began to laugh, a haunting chorus that rose in intensity. The shadows closed in, and the air grew heavy, suffocating her with dread. "We've been waiting," they whispered, their voices a chilling hiss. Megan's breath hitched as she took a step back. Was there truly no escape? In that desperate moment, a figure emerged from the darkness, the man with milky eyes still smiling. "You know the truth now," he murmured. "You belong here with us." And into the enveloping night, a question pierced the silence. Was fear enough to keep her alive, or would it consume her entirely? Megan's heart raced, each pounding beat echoing in her ears like a drum marking the end of her sanity. The shadows loomed larger, a swirling mass of darkness that threatened to swallow her whole. She felt the collective weight of their gaze, and despite the fear tethering her spine, a flicker of defiance sparked within her. "Stay back!" she shouted, the bravado in her voice barely masking her terror. But laughter erupted again, a cacophony tinged with a sinister delight. The shadows didn't halt. They advanced, their forms warping with every step as if the very fabric of reality was shredding. Megan turned, heart hammering against her ribs, searching for an escape. The payphone loomed, still dead and silent, but behind it lay a faint glimmer of hope. A door cracked open, barely visible in the veil of shadow. She bolted toward it, feeling a cold rush of air that reeked of decay. Heart clenched tight, she shoved the door open just wide enough to slip through. It led to a cramped hallway, painted with peeling wallpaper that whispered stories of despair. Behind her, the laughter grew louder, a blaring siren of dread that gnawed at her resolve. She pressed deeper into the corridor, the air thick with an oppressive weight that bore down on her shoulders, threatening to crush her spirit. "Megan!" The voice slithered down the hallway, echoing like a whisper through a tomb. Instinctively, she pressed a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. She couldn't face him, not now, not ever. Images from the diner flashed through her mind, the people who had once been cheerful now twisted into grotesque caricatures, trapped in a state of eternal mirthful torment. They were not corpses but something worse, they were alive yet vacant, puppets doomed to dance in a macabre show for all eternity. A door swung open at the far end of the hall, its hinges creaking like a weary soul. She dashed toward it, praying it wouldn't lead to another trap. As she stepped into the room, a pungent odor of mildew assaulted her senses. It was barely lit, but enough to reveal an ancient desk strewn with brittle papers and a flickering candle. She hesitated, scanning for signs of danger, but the shadowy forms remained outside, still laughing, now echoing her name in rhythmic chant. "Megan, Megan, join us!" Panic bubbled in her chest. She grabbed a scrap of paper, her hands trembling as she read the scrawled notes. They told of others, souls ensnared by the same twisted fate. Desperate pleas for freedom. Warnings about the diner and the man with the milky eyes. Tears streamed down her face, blurring the text. As helplessness washed over her, she suddenly noticed a small window at the top of the wall, too high to reach but not impossible to break. Hope surged. If she could just shatter it, find the strength to escape. The laughter grew louder, now layered with voices she recognized. Friends. Family. They were calling to her, coaxing her back, promising safety. "Megan, we're here." Her heart raced. Were they lost too? Were they watching her suffer? She wanted to scream, but the words lodged painfully in her throat. Torn between fear and desperation, she balled her fists and dedicated herself to breaking the glass. With a prayer, she took a running start. She lunged toward the window, feeling her body coil tight, like a spring about to unleash itself. Just as she was about to collide with the window, a hand reached out from the shadows behind her, gripping her shoulder with an icy touch. "Megan, we can help you." The familiar grin glinted in the dim light. The milky eyes bore into her soul, promising salvation and weaving a web of illusion that tempted her to stay. In that moment, everything went still, and the laughter faded to a distant murmur, threatening to return. With a newfound resolve, Megan snapped, breaking free from the chilling grasp. "I want to be one of you." But as she spun toward the window, would it be enough? The question hung in the cold air, thick with tension, a horrific realization dawning what awaited her beyond the broken glass. In an instant, she lunged and the laughter moved closer, dark and hungry. What if this leap of faith only took her deeper into their nightmarish embrace? Megan's body crashed through the glass, shattering her doubts along with the clear pain. Shards rained down like daggers, slicing at her skin, but the pain felt distant, muffled by the roar of the laughter that echoed behind her. She fell onto the ground, the rough earth biting into her skin. Gasping for air, she pushed herself up, heart racing. The shadows remained behind her, silhouetted against the dim light of the room she had escaped, but there was no guarantee they wouldn't flood through the broken window in pursuit. Around her, the forest loomed, twisted trees reaching out with gnarled branches as if they too wanted to drag her back. She scrambled to her feet and began to run, legs pumping, fear propelling her forward. The laughter transformed into an angry howl, and she didn't dare look back. The night air felt alive, thick with whispers that swirled like a chaotic wind, tugging at her clothes and hair. "Megan, Megan," they taunted her, inviting her back into the shadows. Her name dripped from their veiled mouths like acid. Branches cracked in the distance, an unmistakable sound that sent chills down her spine. Something followed her. She kicked up soil with each frantic step, the ground uneven and treacherous, a twisted maze crafted to ensnare her. Breath hitching, she focused on the path ahead, struggling to see through the oppressive darkness. The trees began to thin, revealing an old road, cracked with years of neglect. An abandoned car slumped beside it, rust eating away at the metal. In the flickering moonlight, it looked almost like a ghost, a relic of a past nobody wanted to remember. Without a thought, she dashed toward it. She yanked the door open, heart racing as she fumbled for the keys, anything to make the engine hum back to life. Desperation clawed at her throat. She had no idea who had last occupied this vehicle, but it could be salvation or her tomb. Twisting the ignition, she felt a surge of hope only to be met with silence. No whirring, no sputter. Just the emptiness that stretched around her. The trees swayed eerily, and somewhere deep in the woods, the laughter faded, then twisted back into a menacing melody, growing thicker like a noose tightening around her throat. "Megan," the voice came soft yet clear, as if the shadows were drawing closer. She pressed her hands to her ears, shaking her head, not wanting to listen. Her thoughts raced back to the people from the diner, the eerie smiles, the hollow eyes. Were they still out there? Were they trapped here, just as she was? A rustling broke through her frantic spiraling thoughts. She leant forward, wide-eyed, straining to listen. Something was approaching, weaving through the underbrush. The moonlight caught the edge of something glimmering. She froze. An emaciated figure emerged, skin pulled tight across bone. But it wasn't entirely human. There were elongated limbs, jagged features shadowed in grotesque realism. At its center, a pair of milky eyes shone in the darkness. Her heart dropped as recognition hit her. The familiar grin split its face, wide and hungry, twisting into something monstrous. Megan. It crooned, slow and deliberate, as if savoring her name like a fine wine. Join us, the laughter returned, echoing from behind her, a chorus of hope turned to horror, drawing ever nearer. Terror coursed through her, and suddenly she was running again, back toward the woods as the car faded from view. No, she screamed, running blind, crashing into underbrush, branches tearing at her flesh, but the ground beneath her gave way. There was no earth left to support her. She plummeted, tumbling down into darkness, swallowed whole by the very nightmares that haunted her. As she hit the bottom, a suffocating silence enveloped her. Megan lay still, breathless, heart pounding in her ears. She opened her eyes to see only darkness ahead, the laughter now a ghostly echo. In the distance, faint whispers, shadows of what had been, called her name from deep within the abyss. Could she reclaim herself from this nightmare? Megan moved tentatively, pushing against the tangible fear that surrounded her. But what if the shadows had more in store, a much darker truth waiting to be uncovered? Megan lay in the pitch black, breath swirling around her like a fog of despair. The silence pressed in, thick and suffocating, as she rose gingerly to her feet. Her heart raced, beating like a drum echoing through deep caverns. Where was she? Slowly, her eyes adjusted to the darkness, catching glimmers of shadow moving unnaturally around her. Is anyone there? She called out, her voice sounding fragile, like glass about to shatter. The echo returned as a cruel mockery, morphing into the hollow laughter that had chased her throughout her ordeal. Join us, it came softly, whispering through the darkness, coaxing her with the same sinister tone she had heard in the diner. Panic surged in her chest. No. She shouted defiantly against the encroaching shadows. You can't take me. You're not real. But the darkness didn't listen. Tendrils crept closer, wrapping themselves around her legs and tugging with a deceptive gentleness. Each pull tested her resolve, urging her to succumb to the all-consuming echoes of her past. Shadows melded together and twisted into those familiar haunting figures, their milky eyes shining with a longing she absolutely detested. You left us, they whispered, voices blending together, forming a symphony of anguish and despair. You will wish to return. Something sharp pierced her throat at those words, a recognition that clawed from within. She couldn't return, not after finding her way out. But the weight of the choice crumbled against the fear. What if she had truly traded one prison for another? Stop! She screamed, fingers curling against the darkness. I won't be part of your nightmare any longer. Suddenly, a strong pulse of light flickered, illuminating the space around her and revealing the figures more vividly than before. They were more than just shadows, they were fragments of lives extinguished, lost in the curse. And the man with the milky eyes stepped from beyond the veil, an inescapable force draped in shadows, grinning like a predator. You think you can escape? He said, voice low, saturated with shame and mockery. You're wrong, Megan. Every choice is a thread woven into this tapestry of despair. A sob caught in her throat. How had she been so blind? They all craved this cycle, the promise of power wrapped in fear. They were forever entangled, and each new story filled the void of those who vanished. No, she rasped, clenching her fists, fighting to stay rooted in her realization. I won't give in. She remembered what she had glimpsed in that moment of clarity. The only way to end the horror was to make her own story her own escape. This was not just a battle for survival, it was a fight for her narrative, summoning courage she never knew she possessed. Megan ripped at the shadows tightening around her, forcing herself to stand taller, to defy their claims. "This ends now," she shouted, her voice a fierce flame igniting the encroaching darkness. The light pulsed brighter, a dazzling brilliance that surged from within her core. It rippled outward, radiating warmth and light, tearing apart the chains of despair binding her to their collective past. The figures writhed in torment, their laughter morphing into cries of anguish as they began to dissolve into fragments of ash. "No. Stop!" the man cried out, his expression twisted in disbelief. "You can't break this cycle." But she could. She was the force of her own fate. As her determination grew, the tendrils disintegrated. Megan vaulted forward, chasing the light that promised freedom beyond the horrors. The shadows howled, retreating as the brilliance consumed them until all that engulfed her was a white beyond comprehension, then silence. Megan awoke on the sidewalk, gasping in the moonlit night air, pulse racing. The street was still and quiet, the world beyond the diner far removed from the nightmares she had just escaped. She pulled herself into a sitting position, shaky and disoriented, heart still thundering. The diner loomed down the road, its neon lights flickering ominously, but she felt a weight lift. She had claimed her truth, she had redefined her narrative. The decisions made in fear no longer held sway over her. She stood threatened but steady and turned her back on it. The past was still there, but there was no need to return. As she walked away, the laughter faded into the distance, a memory of darkness lingering instead of directing her fate. That night, Megan found a new purpose. She stepped into the possibility of a brighter dawn, leaving shadows behind as she stepped forward into life. She wouldn't let the horrors claim her legacy, only she would do that. Now, remember, none of this could have happened without your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you never miss another spine-chilling story. Smash that like button now to fill the algorithm with positivity. Flood the comments below with your reactions and theories about the ending. What do you think will happen to Megan next? And for the love of all things scary, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. Act now. You're the heartbeat of this channel.